Let's bring in Peter Hakim, President Emeritus and a Senior Fellow of the Inter-American Dialogue. Peter, welcome to our program.
Thank you very much.
So, Peter, what is the best case scenario in these talks being mediated in Norway? What are the expectations?
Basically, this is a very good first step. We've got to remember it's a first step. The fact it's taking place in Norway is very good. Norway has a great reputation in monitoring and hosting these kinds of negotiations. And both sides are sending some of their top officials. So this is a real opening. It's the best real opening we've seen in quite a while.
How much of a real opening can it be when the U.S. State Department says the only thing to negotiate with Maduro is conditions for his departure?
Well, there's lots of obstacles in the way, and the U.S. can be helpful or it can be an obstacle. And certainly if it wants to limit the negotiators, it will be an obstacle. On the other hand, it's pressure on the economy in Venezuela probably may help the negotiations proceed in the sense that there's something the U.S. can say, okay, we're going to lift them if.
You talk about the economic crisis, hyperinflation, widespread power outages, shortages of food, medicine, gas, you name it, Peter. So how much of the talks are actually focusing on the humanitarian conditions in the country and not so much about a political solution to a very complicated, complex issue in Venezuela?
Well, I think both have to be part of the negotiations if they're serious. But I think the absolute minimum that has to be done in these beginning negotiations. When you say negotiations, they're really talks at this point. They don't have an agenda that they're negotiating about yet. But I think one is the government has to agree to schedule some kind of democratic election in the future. Second, the opposition and the United States has to be willing to lift sanctions, to provide some protection for people in the government so they're not prosecuted and thrown into jail when there's a change in government. And third, they have to work out how do you govern before the election? What does the intermediate government look like, the interim government?
Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina made some headlines over the weekend, and I want you to listen to what he had to say, and then I want to get your reaction.
Okay.
I would do exactly what Reagan did. I would give Cuba an ultimatum to get out of Venezuela. If they don't, I would let the Venezuelan military know you got to choose between democracy and Maduro. And if you choose Maduro and Cuba, we're coming after you. This is in our backyard. Trump said that he was for democracy against socialism.
So let me just paraphrase what he had to say. He said basically U.S. should be willing and open to invading Venezuela like President Reagan did with Grenada back in the 1980s. I mean, is that even a comparison there?
It suggests it's so badly informed. Grenada was a tiny island country, less than 10,000 people.
100,000 at that time.
100,000, sorry.
Venezuela has a population of 28 million.
And we begin to think of Iraq and Afghanistan and getting involved. Beyond that, the U.S. would lose the support it's really built up with other Latin American countries who firmly oppose any kind of military intervention. It sounds to me like Senator Graham is really talking without really looking at all at the situation, badly informed.
And very quickly, Peter, do you think this administration has a unified policy when it comes to Venezuela? I mean, you've got likes of John Bolton and the Secretary of State, and then you've got President...
Well, I really wonder whether President Trump really cares very much about this, except in terms of showing some victory, one more triumph. But this is very connected to the sense that there are certain regimes in Latin America, Cuba being the most notorious and long-lasting, that have really irritated people like John Bolton and others. Marco Rubio is very much involved. And it sounds to me like they are really intent on pushing forward and claiming victory. And I think Trump is as well. But there's a danger. I think what's needed is patience, persistence, willingness to compromise. That's the question, how much the U.S. will be willing on those fronts.
All right, we'll leave it there. Peter Hakim, thank you so much.